to cite two perhaps unlikely sources to shed some wisdom on the current war over Israel's land and Israel's right to exist that we're seeing, of course, now between Israel and the terrorist group Hamas. I call Hamas a death cult because that's what their ideology stands for. That is who they are. And this death cult is operating right next door to the tiny nation of Israel, which is struggling to defend itself. Israelis have been living under constant, unprovoked attacks from Hamas firing rockets and mortars into Israel, sneaking across its borders to kidnap Israelis and engage in terrorist attacks and continue to state their goal of wiping Israel off the map. And don't believe for a second that their acts of terrorism will stop with just our ally, the Jewish state of Israel. No, they'll move on to more. So with that in mind, my first unlikely source of foreign policy wisdom, believe it or not, it's radio shock jock Howard Stern. We probably disagree on many things. He and I agree on Israel, though. As the media misreports this Middle East war as Israel attacks, Israel thwarts the peace process, they're not even trying. The Jewish community, well, they kill civilians, women, and children. Good Lord, their bias is so glaring. So, Howard Stern's made an impassioned defense of our ally to a caller on his show. He said, if you're anti-Israel, then you're anti-America, because Israel is the only democracy over there. It's the only friend we have who's willing to fight and stand up for what is right, end quote. He is right. Israel is our friend, and America's current leadership is second-guessing them as the Israelis merely act to defend themselves against these attacks by Hamas. Now, the second unlikely source of foreign policy wisdom, none other than Joan Rivers. She was cornered by reporters at an airport, and she gave them an earful with this analogy for the conflict in Gaza. She said, hey, if New Jersey were firing rockets into New York, we would wipe them out. If we heard they were digging tunnels from New Jersey into New York, we would get rid of Jersey. The Palestinians cannot throw rockets and not expect Israelis not to defend themselves. Now, even though Joan, she's a Hollywood style critic, well, no doubt she's repulsed by my style, or lack thereof, but I declare that she is right, and I admire her so much for speaking up for truth. See, these stars, these celebrities, they have great influence, especially obviously with pop culture. We gotta reach the masses here in America and around the world with truth. So I admire these celebrities for having a stiff spine and the boldness, the courage to do what's right and speak for truth. That's what this is basically all about, though, right? What Joan Rivers was saying. Israel defending itself, and rightly so. The Hamas-led Palestinians in Gaza started this. They drew first blood. Anyone who denies this is deceived. Hamas began this latest deadly battle by indiscriminately and unprovoked launching their missiles into Israel, targeting civilians. This is undeniable. And with Hamas using tunnels to mount attacks on Israeli civilians, well, Israel has no choice but to move on Gaza to destroy the tunnel systems as well as Hamas's rocket launchers. And I want to know, if you disagree with me on that, please tell me why. Really, why? What am I missing? Tell me. This is a matter of self-defense, plain and simple. To me, I'm confused as to why anyone could tell me that I'm wrong. I love to battle in the arena of ideas and ideals and what's right and what's wrong. So I do want to hear from you, those who would disagree. Shoot, just today, driving home, I called into the Michael Medved radio show. I think kind of freaked him out by just calling in on his regular call-in line, because I wanted to debate him on something that was within the arena of ideas. He and I disagree on how to hold this current lawless imperial president accountable. You guys know my position. Of course, I know that drafting articles of impeachment is the only remedy the Constitution offers us to rein in the lawlessness. It is the ultimate check. Michael claims that John Boehner's talk of lawyers filing a lawsuit will slow down this fundamental transformation of America that really it's only going to get worse unless Congress gets serious about doing their job for the people. Now, though, off the air, Michael and I talked about something we absolutely agree on. That's our ally Israel and Israel's right to defend themselves. So let's be clear. No decent person, certainly no Israeli, likes to see innocent civilians killed, especially children. Children are always the most tragic victims of war. Man, it breaks our hearts to see children ever getting caught up in the middle. But there is only one side in this conflict that deliberately puts children in harm's way and, in fact, deliberately targets children in suicide attacks. It's not Israel doing this. As Prime Minister Netanyahu famously said, Israel develops missile defense systems to protect our citizens, while they use their citizens to protect their missiles. And this is what makes all the difference. It is black and white. It is clear as Arctic ice. Using children and other innocent civilians as human shields, that's reprehensible, that tactic. And it's denounced by every decent person and every human rights organization. Israel does everything it can to avoid civilian casualties. Perhaps you don't see that, though, through the mainstream media. This is while Hamas doesn't care about civilians at all. This is the death cult. The death cult purposely throws life away, and that is the tragic difference. No one wants lasting peace more than Israel, and they are desperately in need of a partner, an ally in seeking peace. Hamas is not it. As former Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir famously said, peace will come when the Palestinians love their children more than they hate Israel. And our country financially supports the Palestinians? Cut it off, Congress. Cut it off. The Palestinian Hamas government, will they ever firmly acknowledge for all time and with no equivocation Israel's right to exist? Oh, well, until then, cut it off. Secretary of State John Kerry is calling for both sides to quit fighting. That's what he said today. Such a suggestion makes it sound as if Israel is equally at fault here. Oh, he's so off base. That is the worst argument I've heard in forever. Instead of thwarting Israel's right to defend itself with arbitrary ceasefire agreements and mandates coming down from even our government, we should be letting them destroy these terrorist tunnels in Gaza once and for all. And one final thought. I find it interesting that it took a Hollywood fashion critic and a shock jock to cut through the nonsense to get to the truth of the matter. All of us need to speak up more often. If not us speaking up for truth in defense of Israel's right to exist, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when?